Premier Scott Moe began the week saying the BC coast is Canada's coast, and Moe is backing Alberta's Premier's push for a pipeline to the west coast. He was also in Moose Jaw this week, and that appearance resulted in some confusion over the location of a shelter. Murray Mandryk is a political columnist who joins us now, along with Jeremy Symes, who covers the legislature for the Canadian Press. Hello to you both.
Good morning.
Jeremy, let's start with you. What's been the reaction to those comments from the Premier about BC's coastline being Canada's?
Yeah, it's been quite polarizing, I think. Pipeline politics in this country always are. So yeah, Daniel Smith of Alberta has proposed this bitumen pipeline to go to the northwest coast in BC. You can kind of look back to the Northern Gateway project in 2016, and we had the BC government opposed to that, First Nations opposed to that, the Trudeau Liberals were also against that, which led to the cancellation of that pipeline. And so we're seeing that resurface, those feelings resurface again. David Eby, the Premier of BC, strongly opposed. He called this pipeline a fantasy. It's going to possibly upend the tanker ban, he says, if it ever goes through, which would negatively affect the environment if we got rid of that tanker ban. And he's also saying Smith can use the Trans Mountain Expansion project already. That's the other pipeline that goes south through BC. There's more room in there for oil and gas, and so he's saying she could just use that one instead. Now, Smith came out against Eby right after that and said he's being un-Canadian and unconstitutional. Premier Moe has supported that position, says it's it's not BC's coast, it's Canada's coast, like you mentioned. And he's also argued, hey, like provinces own their oil and gas, their potash, but the federal government actually has jurisdiction over the ports, and that's why he's saying that. And BC's position, he thinks, doesn't matter here.
And Murray, some have said this is inconsistent with Moe's arguments about provincial jurisdiction, taking things to the Supreme Court, where he argued in many cases that provincial jurisdiction had precedence over federal jurisdiction when it came to natural resources. What do you think of that?
Or most everything in terms of his use of the notwithstanding clause. I think he has an absolute point, by the way. I think, as per the Angus Reid poll that you mentioned earlier before we got into this segment, there is a desire right now in Canada to prioritize economic opportunities because we're lacking economic opportunities. This is the very issue that's causing consternation in Alberta and Saskatchewan in terms of what's driving the separatism thoughts or thoughts of joining the United States, because we understand that we're a landlocked province here, and the frustration is getting stuff to port, the rail strikes, everything that we've long suffered for in this part of the world where we can't get our product to port. That said, you have two premiers, in particular I'll speak to the one in Saskatchewan, but the one in Alberta is as bad or worse, who is absolutely fighting the notion of any limitations on the notwithstanding clause or premiers using their provincial authority or seeing the rights of premiers to use their provincial authority to basically do what people want to do in the jurisdiction, even if it's against national trends or national interests. This obviously wasn't Moe's argument when he was arguing about Bill 137 and the pronoun rights. It hasn't been his arguments in the past in relation to climate change and other issues, taking the matter to the Supreme Court and other things, and basically threatening the use of the notwithstanding clause as such. There's a huge NIMBY argument in BC and everything else, but there's always been a huge NIMBY argument in Saskatchewan about this. So I think that while the Premier is probably right in terms of public opinion and in terms of just what's needed in this country right now, in terms of something that's unifying, and we do need BC needs to seriously think about what its position is doing to the rest of the country, and particularly this part of the country. There needs to be a little bit more consistency from Alberta and Saskatchewan as to what tools are at its avail to prevent problems in your own jurisdiction or to deal with problems in your own jurisdiction. You can't argue that the notwithstanding clause works when it works in your interests on things that are just politically popular or things that you think you can make politically popular, and then basically turn around and say, well, another province can't use the same, if not the same tool, the same approach.
And Jeremy, switching gears, the NDP held its convention last weekend. What were the major takeaways there?
Yeah, I think the major takeaway was NDP leader Carla Beck receiving 87% support from delegates. Historically, you look at this party, the former leaders, Dwayne Lingenfelter, Cam Broughton, they never made it to this leadership vote because they lost their seats in their elections. Ryan Miley, the former leader of the NDP, only got 72% in 2021. At the time, he was trying to argue it wasn't a big deal, but there were rifts in the party, and that did reflect on his leadership vote, and he left about a year after losing the Athabasca by-election. So I think the NDP is feeling good about this result. They're trying to show that they're the government in waiting. They have 27 seats in the legislature. Beck is saying she's going to keep focusing on affordability and healthcare issues, and just maybe some insider stuff here, but they've also said that Ron Stiles, their former senior advisor, will now lead the party's transition team if they form government. So again, I think they're just trying to show to the public that they are the next government in waiting.
And Murray, what do you make of that, the 87% and also the appointment of Ron Stiles to this transition team?
Well, this is a leader in a party that doubled its seat count, and you think it would be better. 87% is not fantastic, and I'm very curious that wasn't higher. That it's incredible political spin to suggest this is the highest post-election result. Should be huge, like considering the results of the election. So I am very curious of where this opposition is coming from. If it's from rural delegates that are disgruntled because they're going nowhere, if it's from Saskatoon delegates for whatever reason, which would seem odd because they did better in Saskatoon proportionally than they did almost any place else in the province. And Saskatoon was where the convention was. More curious is I'm wondering if Premier Scott Moe can repeat these numbers at his own convention next month, and we'll be talking about that a fair bit because there's one of the other themes from Randy Weeks coming out of this convention was Randy Weeks, former Sask Party MLA, who apparently has joined the NDP with a card right now, is talking about how absolutely interesting this whole Sask Party convention was. So there is a bit of a bar being set with the 87% figure in terms of the Sask Party. But no, I don't think 87% is bad, but I think it's something to be a bit curious about.
And Jeremy, I mentioned, this week Scott Moe was in Moose Jaw, and there was a bit of an interesting news conference featuring, the mayor and MLAs there from the area. Justice Minister Tim McLeod, who's an MLA in Moose Jaw, and the mayor suggested the province was moving the downtown shelter, and he was not in the loop. What's the latest on this?
Yeah, so the latest here is, the ministry has clarified it's not ordered the shelter to be moved from the downtown. However, the ministry, the province is discussing with the city what to do with this downtown shelter that could look like it is going to be moved somewhere else, but that'll be up to the city, is what the ministry is saying. They have to come to the province with a proposal. It's been a big talker in Moose Jaw since then, just because of this downtown shelter. And the John Howard Society was completely left in the dark in this as well. And they're saying, even if you do move it, there's still going to be homelessness in Moose Jaw, and we got to get at the root cause of this issue.
And Murray, one of the things that came up during this was, a clip from Tim McLeod that we played a couple of days ago, where he says, well, if the mayor is not aware of the downtown business groups and these others saying that they are concerned about this, well, we've heard that, the MLAs have heard that. Is there a lack of communication there? Is this something that these groups need to get on sit on the same page here? Because if you're watching the news conference, it was quite striking that there seemed to be some miscommunication.
Well, a red hot mess. It was just like absolutely ridiculous in terms of this. I don't know who was in charge of sort of the rollout and the handling, but they didn't do a very good job. That's to state the obvious. These conversations should have been sorted out long before that. The implication at the time in terms of the conference was that this was something the province was pushing Moose Jaw to do, which is rather ham-handed, and the province has no business doing. You can't be going from the downtown business district to your local MLAs and saying this is what any city should be doing. There is a process here, and there is a protocol here. They need to be working together, and they quite obviously weren't. This this is a problem with the MLAs. They are not doing a good job because they just heard this from the business community and everything else, and they don't represent just the business community as MLAs. They represent the whole cities and ridings that they represent, and that would include people that are homeless. And there needs to be a place for this. This can't be strictly about Moose Jaw tourism. It can't be strictly about tourism or the looks of the city anywhere. So I don't think this is a grand moment for the MLAs in Moose Jaw either. I think this is just a mess.
Murray, Jeremy, thanks so much.
You're very welcome.